Spring ball is almost here, and the questions about the 2025 Notre Dame football team are already piling up. Can CJ Carr win the starting quarterback job? Will Jeremiyah Love be a Heisman finalist? Luke Smith and I cover it all on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. And thank you for joining me here on Wednesday, March 5th. And thanks for making this your first listen each and every day. I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast. And joining me today is my good friend and former co-host Luke Smith to play a game of buy, sell, or hold. We're breaking down the biggest questions about the Irish as we head into spring practice, and we'll make some predictions as well. If you're unfamiliar with this segment, here's how it works. I'm going to throw out a statement, and then we'll decide whether we're buying it, if we believe it'll happen, selling it, if we don't think it will happen, or holding, which means we're not quite sure yet and need more info. This was a lot of fun, and we had some great debates about our predictions. Let's get into it. All right, after a brief hiatus, Luke Smith is back on the show, but before we get into buy or sell, the people have been wondering, how's the offseason been treating you?
It's good. I think it was a nice month or so off for me after the longest college football season ever. Looking forward to kind of getting back into it already. It's weird. I feel like normally when the season ends, you kind of want some time away from it. But this year I didn't feel that as much. But I have kind of just more organically not been following recruiting or anything like that, which sounds like listening to your shows is a good thing because it's a dead period and a lot of other people seem unhappy with it. So I'm doing all right by just kind of passively existing in the concept of Notre Dame football right now.
I know. I feel like when the season ended, obviously disappointed that Notre Dame lost in the national championship, but it felt like such a long run that I did kind of want a break to some extent. But now looking back, I miss all those memories and stuff because really that run from USC through Ohio State was some of the most fun times of my entire life. And I'm sure you feel the same.
Definitely. And before we just got started here, I was looking back at the video that Notre Dame put out at the end of the season, recapping the year. And it was interesting because I think the national championship game was probably at this point, something like let's say 50-ish days ago. Does that sound right? Let's see.
Yeah, about 6 weeks.
Yeah. And it's funny because in that video, you got Freeman talking to the team before the Georgia game, talking about the pain of 116 days ago being NIU. And it just puts into perspective how long that season was. Because in some ways the national championship feels like a long time ago. And the gap between game 2 and game 14 was double that basically. So just goes to show you how long that season was. And then there was, 2 more weeks after that too.
Right, and the fact that we're here today, just not even a couple weeks away from the start of spring practice, shows you just how quickly things are moving. Like, as I was coming up with some of these props and I was thinking about the upcoming season, I was like, man, it is time to turn the page. But in a way, the season feels like it's fast approaching because we got spring practice and then the summer is going to fly by. Next thing you know it, Notre Dame is going to be kicking off the season in Miami.
They are, and I think the other day they officially announced the kickoff time for that one too, which is going to be the Sunday game at 7:30. So that's always a sign that, we're not that far off. And even with it just seems like everything is so condensed now, which feels like it falls in juxtaposition to the season being so long. But the combine didn't seem like that big of a deal as it normally is, and part of that is because nobody's competing in or testing really because the season was so long. So it's just like there's so many events happening in quick succession. And like you're saying, before we know it, they're going to be back in that stadium that maybe just maybe might no longer be a house of horrors.
Well, it looks like they exercised some demons, but that was against Penn State. They're going to have to do it against the Hurricanes. But that is a great segue into our buy or sell props because the first one I have for you is CJ Carr will start for Notre Dame in the season opener against Miami.
I'm going to sell this one, and I would be very happy to be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I think that means that CJ Carr has just exploded through the spring and the summer, and he's no doubt the starter. But just have a feeling, and I don't think I'm alone in this, that this is going to be Steve Angeli's job in the opener and maybe in week 3 after the bye too against Texas A&M too. But I just think if there's anything we've learned about Marcus Freeman, it's that he feels like there isn't any exchange for experience. And of those guys in that room, Steve Angeli has the most. And that seems like a mistake that Freeman doesn't want to repeat after what he endured during 2022. And I just have a feeling that while CJ Carr likely will play at some point during the year, and I think will get the job at some point, it's going to be Steve Angeli starting down in Miami Gardens.
I'm with you. I'm also selling this. I said it before. I think they're going to go with Steve Angeli to start the season, and I feel like a big reason why is the gap between the two of them is going to be very close at the end of spring. I would be surprised if CJ Carr is able to make up all of that ground that Steve Angeli has on him going into the spring, all in the span of about a month's worth of practices. Not even that, honestly. It's probably just 15 total practices. So then that keep Steve Angeli around and CJ Carr, and then they go into fall camp with the great quarterback competition still ongoing, and I think that Angeli will get the nod at the start of the season, but that leads me to the second prop, because this is where I think it gets good. Notre Dame will use the same starting quarterback for the entire season, barring injury.
Yeah, I'm selling this one as well, and I already answered that, saying that I do think that at some point CJ Carr will supplant Steve Angeli, but the barring injury is a critical one here, because I think that this past year might have been the first year in since 2020 that Notre Dame had the same starting quarterback in every game. Is that right? And that year was also an anomaly in itself a little bit, because actually maybe Book started every game in 19 and 20, but he didn't in 18, obviously.
Yeah.
And 17, it's more times than not, there's multiple starting quarterbacks. I get the barring injury is an important distinction here, but regardless of that, I do think CJ Carr is going to start the games eventually at some point during the season.
Notre Dame has actually had pretty good injury luck with their starting quarterback in recent years, because Riley Leonard started every game last year, but Hartman started every regular season game. He opted out of the Sun Bowl.
Yep.
So that counts. I feel like Cone started every game, but then he would just get benched during the game.
Did he? I guess maybe he did.
I think he started every game, but he was pulled multiple times.
There was a lot
season.
of quarterback play.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of quarterbacks that played. Yeah. Okay.
Buckner got some time, Pine got some time, but Jack Cohn was the starter in every game. So, yeah, they've actually had some pretty good luck at the position. But I think the big question here is if they go with Angeli to start and they beat Miami and then they beat A&M in week 3 and then they beat Purdue, if things are rolling, but maybe they feel a little bit better, would they be willing to make the move to CJ Carr after a few good wins? Because they made the switch from Brandon Wimbush to Ian Book back in 2018, but that was basically after they barely beat Ball State and Vanderbilt. Those were technically losses in a way in terms of how the offense performed. But if they start 3-0, it's hard for me to imagine that Freeman is going to be willing to pull Angeli that early on in the season.
You're right. It's definitely a little bit different, but honestly, what that reminds me of a little bit is Clemson in 2018, because if you look at what they did that year, they beat a bad Furman team, and then they escaped the Texas A&M team that was ranked in the top 20, and then beat a Georgia Southern team pretty handily. But that was Kelly Bryant, and then they went to Trevor Lawrence in week 4, and the rest is history. Now, I get that this is 2 wins versus 3, or maybe I'm just thinking, or 2 good wins versus 1. Maybe I'm just thinking because Texas A&M is the common denominator here. That's why it reminds me of it. But maybe that's a little bit more of an even comparison, just based on what happened. But you're right. It's definitely rolling the dice a little bit.
And it was harder for Clemson to make that move because at that point, Kelly Bryant had already started a full season, and they made it to the college football playoff the year before. Right. But Trevor Lawrence was just that good. Though I've also looked at that season. They did try to do the 2 quarterback thing at the start of the year, and then it became clear that Trevor Lawrence was the guy that they were going to go with. Do you think Freeman would be willing to go with the 2 quarterback system early on?
It seems like he would antithesis that for whatever reason. I don't know that I have actual data to back that up, but it kind of seems like his entire mindset in general with players is we're going to play the best guys, or the guys that give us the best chance to win, and you're either all in and you're out, or you're out. And I don't think that you can commit to the all in or out by splitting reps.
I'm with you. I think their styles are too similar. Like, it doesn't really make sense. It's
That
not like
too.
CJ Carr is a much better runner than Steve Angeli. They both can run a little bit, but it's not like you're going to bring in CJ Carr just for a designed run package or anything like that. But it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. The next one I have for you. Jeremiyah Love will be Notre Dame's first Heisman finalist since Manti Te'o in 2012.
I am buying this, and partially because I think Notre Dame is going to put its best foot forward with a more apt social media department than they've had in previous years, and just marketing campaign in trying to market him for this. And I also think that, while Jaywan Sider did his own sort of managing running back tandems at Penn State, I think he might be more inclined to give Jeremiyah Love more opportunities to showcase his abilities and be in this conversation compared to what Dylan McCullough did. Maybe I'm off base on that, but that's just the perception I get. And I think that getting those sort of opportunities will allow him to be in that Heisman conversation.
The marketing push is going to be interesting to watch because it's going to start before the season. Like, last time Notre Dame had anything of this caliber was Josh Adams back in 2017, the famous 33 trucking. But no one was talking about Josh Adams as a Heisman candidate going into the season. But then as the season went on and the offensive line was so dominant, he was just running away from teams, then it became a thing. But now I feel like the Fighting Irish media is in such a great place. Like, they absolutely killed it throughout last season and throughout that playoff run. So I think he's going to have the marketing push, but I'm actually going to sell this because I don't think he's going to put up the numbers to get invited as a running back. And to be clear, I think that Jeremiyah Love is going to be the best running back in the country next year. But this is a quarterback-driven award. I know that Travis Hunter won it last year, but he was playing both ways. But Ashton Genty got invited. These are his stats last year. 374 carries, 2,600 rushing yards, 29 touchdowns. Jeremiyah Love had 163 carries, 1,125 rushing yards, and 17 touchdowns in more games played. Notre Dame has so many talented backs that they're going to have to share the love, and it will effectively hurt Jeremiyah Love.
That's fair. I guess that's kind of where we diverge, is that I do think he'll get some of those opportunities to put out those numbers, but there's another guy or maybe a couple other guys in that backfield who are just as good there to get their chances as well.
Luke Smith and I have plenty more to get to, including whether or not Notre Dame will have a top 10 defense in Chris Ash's first season as defensive coordinator. Plus, we'll break down the chances of the Irish hosting another playoff game in 2025. But first, a word from Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 more top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Yeah, let's stay with the running backs. The next prompt here is Notre Dame will have 2,000-yard rushers next season.
So I think I'm going to hold on this one. And part of the reason is, so last year, Jeremiyah Love did eclipse 1,000 yards. Jadarian Price wasn't that far off with, I think, 746.
Yep.
And the reason I'm holding is just because of what I just mentioned, where maybe Love does get more of an ability to showcase. But the reason I would be inclined to buy this is I'm really looking forward to Notre Dame playing some bad defenses again, like they did in the start of or most of last season, because when you look back at those highlights, just the amount of opportunities that Love and Price had to just run away from a defense because they were much faster and stronger than all those guys, pretty fun to watch. And of course, those opportunities became lessened in the playoff. But I think you forget that was what a lot of that season was, just going up against the schedule that Notre Dame went up against last year. And I realized that the schedule this year probably should be tougher. However, it's not going to be playoff caliber competition every week like they saw over the last month.
I like your point, but I'm actually going to buy this one. And I think a big reason why is because Notre Dame is not going to run with their quarterback nearly as much next season. And that took up a lot of rushing yards and a lot of rushing touchdowns. Like Riley Leonard finished last season with 906 rushing yards and 17 touchdowns. And Jadarian Price still finished with 746 rushing yards. So I think they're both going to get over 1,000. In order for this to happen, they're probably going to have to make it to at least the second round of the college football playoff to get a couple more games in. But we know Ja'Juan Seider loves to rotate two running backs. He's got two great ones in the room in Love and Price. But the biggest thing that could prevent this from happening is Aeneas Williams, or maybe even Kedron Young. Like maybe they just have to share the ball so much that Aeneas Williams ends up getting closer to, let's say, 500 or 400 rushing yards next season because he finished last year with 219. If they have to spread the ball to three different guys or at least fit Williams and Young in a little bit more than before, then maybe Price isn't able to get over 1,000 yards. But I think they're going to do it.
Okay. I mean, I'd be all for it, but like I said, I'm holding. I will like to see more about what we hear also in terms of Kedron Young coming out of spring and see how that might dictate things as well.
All right, this is less a stats thing, but it pertains to the offensive line and one particular individual. Anthony Knapp will start on the offensive line to open the season.
This is going to sound crazy because he just started 15 games, but I'm selling this. And it's just because of how talented I think this Notre Dame offensive line is. I think his best chance to start would be if he beat out Ashton Craig at center, but I don't see that happening right now. And so I'm going to sell this, and then he's going to be kind of that sixth guy, swing guy that can go in when anybody gets hurt.
I'm going to buy this because I think they're going to move him to guard. Maybe he plays center during spring because he was actually playing center in spring practice of last year when he was just an early enrollee freshman. He was coming out of spring as the third string center before they moved him to left tackle, ended up starting 15 games at the position. But I think we all expect to see Charles Jagasaw at least get the first crack at left tackle. Maybe they decide to give Gerby Lambert a shot there and then move Jagasaw. But I actually think Nat will start at right guard to open the season because I think they just feel really comfortable with Jagasaw at left tackle, Emil Wagner at right tackle, and then that means Gerby Lambert is going to be the odd man out, and then Anthony Knapp gets the start at right guard, which is pretty interesting to start one whole season at left tackle and then move to the inside. You don't really see that very often, but I think that's what's going to happen with Knapp.
Yeah, I'm not going to necessarily argue with you, and it's crazy because for a guy that had missed the entire season, Charles Jagasaw played pretty well in the national championship game at tackle. However, like as somebody who's been on this podcast before, said once, where is Gerby going to play? That's the real question. And I just think the way that people talk about that guy, I'd be surprised if he wasn't in the starting lineup. And I know it's just kind of just an embarrassment of riches that Notre Dame has, but I'm inclined to believe that maybe Lambert gets a crack at tackle and it's Jagasaw guard. So we'll see.
All right, last one on the offense here. Notre Dame will finish in the top 10 in scoring offense next season.
So I think they were in the top 10 of scoring offense last year.
They were 10th. Yep.
Yeah, and this is going to sound crazy, but I think I'm buying this. I think they might be closer to top 5. I think they're going to have an opportunity to put up even more points potentially because they averaged, 36 points a game is what I'm seeing.
Yep.
And they've scored 14 against NIU. And then, of course, in the playoffs, I don't think did they hit 30 once? Yeah, so that goes to show you just against whatever they played last year, they really put up a ton of points. And I think that with an ability to pass perhaps more readily this year compared to last year, that they might be better suited to put up even more. So I'm buying this.
I'm going to hold this. I need to see what happens with the quarterback situation, but I think it's going to be close because you look at some of the games they had last year. I mean, Purdue, they had 66 points, Stanford 49, Navy 51, Florida State 52, Army 49, USC 49. Like, there's just not as many games on the schedule this year where I think they're going to be putting up 50 plus. Like, they're still going to win some games pretty easily, but they just played some bad teams last year and they would just run away with it. So I'm going to hold for now, but I agree with you. This offense might be better in big games. They just might not put up quite the same numbers.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess just like even in 2023, were they a top 10 offense that year? Like I think they averaged more points in 2023, didn't they?
Yeah.
And that team was very frustrating at points, which I think is just maybe the larger point that perhaps the schedule is tougher this year, but I just think across college football, Notre Dame compared to most teams is way better and generally puts up a ton of points. But I don't necessarily disagree with your position. It's just it's not where I'm falling.
Yeah, the offense in 2023 put up 42, 56, 45, and 41 to start the year, and then 14 against Ohio State, and then 21 against Duke. So they beat the hell out of the bad teams, but couldn't perform quite the same way against some of the better teams. All right, let's flip it over to the defense now. First one, Boubacar Traore will lead the team in sacks.
Selling this for two reasons, really. One, just still need to see a little bit more in terms of his progression coming off the injury from last year, but also because I think Bryce Young is poised to be the team leader in sacks this year. You saw some flashes towards the end of his freshman year, not just on special teams. Obviously, had the sack against Indiana as well, played well throughout the playoffs. I think Bryce Young's going to lead the team in sacks next year.
I think you're looking at my notes because I have the same thing written down. I'm not sure about Traore's health, and I think Bryce Young is going to lead the team. So we'll just move on to the next one. Drake Bowen will lead the team in tackles.
This I'm going to buy. Drake Bowen was a guy who I think if you would go back and listen to shows we did last August, July, probably the guy that I had the most questions about on that defense last year, and he answered all of them in resounding fashion. Really, by the end of the year, as a true sophomore, was a leader on that defense, and I think this year we're going to see him as maybe the leader on that defense. Probably going to have the green dot, could be a captain as a junior, and I think performance-wise, he's well-positioned to lead the team in tackles.
I'm buying this as well. He was third on the team in tackles last season. The only guys he was behind were Jack Kaiser and Xavier Watts. I think he's going to have an increased role this season. The only way that he would not lead the team in tackles is if, one, he gets hurt, or two, they just rotate even more at linebacker because they have so many talented players with Bowen, KVA, Sneed, Osbury, and now the true freshman, Madden Framo, coming in. So that's really the only way I could see him not getting the team lead in tackles, but I'm with you. So we're both in agreement on the first two. How about this one? Adon Schuler will lead the team in takeaways.
So I'm assuming Watts led the team in takeaways this past year, right? What
yeah,
he had, like
6 interceptions, and he also had a fumble recovery.
Okay. And I think Schuler, as I'm looking at it this year, had 3 picks and a fumble recovery. I'm going to hold on this because he might be best suited just because I don't know how often guys are going to throw at Leonard Moore. But I do think that I know Christian Gray, of course, had the disappointing end to the season with a singular play matched up against Jeremiah Smith. But I think people are forgetting that he was still a pretty young corner last year, and I think his highs outweighed his lows more and more, and he, despite dropping so many picks early in the year, if he's able to work on that over the offseason, just, get in the jugs machine, catch some passes, he might be poised to lead the team in takeaways next year, just because teams might continue to pick on him until, midway through the year, they realize that's not such a good idea anymore.
So I was thinking along the same lines. I was looking at Leonard Moore to start, but I just don't think teams are going to throw at him. Like Benjamin Morrison had 7 interceptions his freshman season. He didn't have 1 this past season, and he only had 3 the year before that. Like once Morrison established himself as a true lockdown corner, teams stopped trying him, so he didn't have many opportunities to get an interception. But they got to throw it to some side. I think that Gray has a chance, but I just feel a little bit better about Adon Schuler. I think he's just kind of always around the ball. He might get a couple fumble recoveries, and I think Gray is going to be a little bit better as a true lockdown corner, but getting 6 interceptions is really hard to do as a corner unless you're not that good and they're really trying you. So I don't know if Adon Schuler is going to get to 6 like Xavier Watts did last year, but I'm going to buy this. I think he will lead the team in takeaways. All right, this next one, it's more of a big picture one. Chris Ash's defense will finish top 10 in scoring defense in the country.
So I'm going to sell this one just because a couple reasons. I think that there's probably some regression that can be expected just based on Notre Dame finishing 3rd last year and I think 9th the year before as well. also Chris Ash's first year with this defense. And as much as he can say, we're just going to keep doing what we've been doing here. If it's not broke, you don't need to fix it. I do think that there will be some growing pains just associated with some new terminology, new guy coming in, getting to learn his players. Like, I don't think it's going to be a disaster. I think it'll still be a very good defense, but I do think there's going to be a couple games that the offense is going to have to win for them. So I'm going to say that they're going to finish outside the top 10, probably inside the top 20.
So I'm buying this, but this is maybe the least confident buy that I have. Because if you look at last season, Notre Dame finished tied for fourth in scoring defense. They gave up an average of 15.5 points per game. At 10 is Alabama, who gave up 17.38 points, and they were right in front of Iowa. So I do expect a regression. I certainly don't think they're going to be top 5 this season, but I don't know. I was just thinking about Alabama's defense last year, and they were good, certainly, but I didn't look at that. I didn't look at them as this, very dominant elite group or anything like that. And I look at who Notre Dame is playing next year. It's definitely a tougher schedule, but like Miami with Carson Beck coming off the injury, how good are they going to be to start the year? Like, I don't think they play enough potent offenses to have that game where they just give up a ton of points. Now, they did give up 35 to USC, and that kind of impacted the number here. They have USC at home next year. So I'm going to buy this, but I think it's going to be really close. I think they're going to be closer to that 10-15 range than the top 5 like they have been these past couple seasons.
Yeah, if they're in the top 10, that's great. I just tend to believe they'll be just outside of it.
Notre Dame will have at least one All-American on defense. It doesn't have to be first team. Could be third team, second team, or first team.
Yeah, let's buy this. And if it's not just first team, then maybe there's more than one, honestly. And I think if Notre Dame wants to get back to where we'd like them to get, they're going to need more than one. So I'm going to say at least one, absolute buy. 2, let's buy that too.
All right. Who is your auto? Is it Leonard Moore?
It's Leonard Moore. And then, frankly, I think it could be either any number of Bryce Young, Adon Schuler, and I don't know when I became such this Christian Gray defender. I kind of think he's going to have a great year next year. I really do.
Man, if they have 2 All-American corners, they're going to be doing all right next season.
Yeah. So maybe
Leonard
then
Moore
I should change my top 10 scoring defense thing.
That's true. That's true. I think Leonard Moore is the safest one. I think he will make, one of the 3 All-American teams. He'll be a consensus in that regard. And I'm with you. I think Bryce Young could sneak in. The only issue with Bryce Young is that he plays defensive end, and he's going to have to rotate with Josh Burnham, who I also think is good. And you have to put up big-time numbers at defensive end to be an All-American because those guys are racking up sacks. So it's going to be a little bit harder for him. I don't think there's going to be enough snaps for one individual at linebacker, so I don't really see one there. So I feel confident about 1, not so confident about 2. But it's honestly a good place for Notre Dame to be that Leonard Moore is already in such good standing that we're like, yeah, he'll definitely be an All-American next year as a true sophomore. All right, last one on the defense. Linebacker Manti Te'o will have the best season of any true freshman on the team.
Let's hold on this until we see or hear some early returns on spring and honestly maybe even early summer, because I do think he's maybe the best position to do so, which is crazy because that linebacker room is loaded, but it seems like the linebackers will rotate more than the defensive backfield, perhaps, where I think the 2 guys that might have a case at this, if those positions weren't so loaded, are Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden. And I just don't know if they're going to get the opportunities that Manti Te'o might get. So I'd still like to hold because it seems like every year there's somebody that, pops up that we weren't thinking about. But for right now, let's hold.
I'm going to hold as well because I want to say it's going to be the tight end, James Flanagan. But considering he's not even an early enrollee and we're not going to see him, it'd be kind of crazy for me to just say, sell, it's going to be Flanagan when he's not even on the team. He's still in high school right now. But Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated has been on this for years. Like, we talk so much about early enrollee freshmen and how much that helps them, but Notre Dame's best true freshman for like the past 6 years has not been an early enrollee. Last year, Leonard Moore, not an early enrollee. So I do think, I don't know what to make of that, honestly, but I think that James Flanagan, I'm holding out hope for him to be that best true freshman, because Notre Dame's so thin at tight end route, so thin at tight end now. Like, they really need him to be the best true freshman. Whereas, like, if Matt Framo's the best, it's more of like a bonus.
Yeah, exactly. That's totally how I feel too.
All right, now let's move away from just offense, defense specific. Let's look big picture now. Notre Dame will finish undefeated at home in 2025.
I'm buying. They're going 7-0 at home. Obviously, there are a couple tricky ones in there with A&M, SC, and even Boise State. I know people have maybe suggested the idea that NC State could be a tough game. I don't see that. I think they're actually on the decline. Syracuse might actually be more threatening than NC State, but I think Notre Dame takes care of business at home. If there was a MAC school, I might feel a little bit differently about this, but there's not.
I know. Isn't it crazy that you look at the schedule and you see Purdue, a Big Ten team, week 3, and you're like, okay, Notre Dame should be good against them, as opposed to Northern Illinois or Marshall. I'm holding this. I need to know a little bit more about Texas A&M. They brought in a really good transfer class. They got a ton of really good receivers, but I still have my doubts about Marcel Reed as a quarterback, as like a true throwing threat. And their defense lost a lot, like Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, but I just have a lot of faith in Mike Elko. And considering Notre Dame got them in their place last year, I am a little bit concerned that Texas A&M might have a little bit more juice to this one in Notre Dame's home opener. So I'm going to hold that one. But next one, on the topic of MAC teams, Notre Dame will not lose to a team that they are favored against.
Well, is there going to be a regular season game in which they're not favored?
What's the early line on Miami?
I think Notre Dame's favored by like 3.5 or something like that. And it honestly might even be more because I don't really know what Carson Beck's status is.
Yeah, so right now on FanDuel, you can get him at -2.5. So basically, to that point, you're
will they lose a game?
Yeah, will they lose a game?
You know, it feels crazy to go out and predict an undefeated season.
I love it. We're in early March. Fire it up.
On March 4th. But I think I'm going to do just that, I guess. Now, this can change, right? Injuries can happen.
Yeah.
Teams can far exceed expectations. But for now, I don't think they're going to lose a game they're favored against. They've been the best against the spread of like anybody in the country for the last 7 years. And I think that trend continues in 2025.
I do not share the same level of confidence right now. I'm selling this. I do think that they're going to have at least one slip up because this has been Marcus Freeman's kryptonite so far. He needs to go through a full season without one of these losses. And it was great last year how they were able to use the loss to Northern Illinois as a way to motivate them each and every week. But the fact that that happened the week after the Texas A&M game, like, I don't know how he's going to adjust his preparation and his message to his team this season to ensure that that never happens again. But until he goes through a full season without one of these losses, I'm going to have to sell this one. All right, now, this is my favorite one. This is courtesy of Luke. Notre Dame will make it to another national championship in football before the men's basketball team wins another NCAA tournament game.
Let's buy this. Okay.
I'm buying it too.
Here's why I'm saying this, because I think it's going to be very difficult to make it back to the national title game this year. Don't get me wrong. I mean, realistically, it's going to be hard to get back there again in the next couple of years, but I do think 2 years from now, Notre Dame could be very well poised, particularly if this year goes well with CJ Carr to make a deep run once again and, go to the national title game. I'm hopeful that 2 years from now, so in the 2027 NCAA tournament, that Notre Dame has a chance of making that. I don't think it's happening next year, unfortunately. And then maybe they can win a game if he's still around. But yeah, I guess maybe a bigger piece of this is just basketball team's not in good shape right now. And it's definitely made me go back and look at what Mike Bray did throughout the years and just appreciate it significantly more. I know it's a different sport, but wow, it's not a pretty sight inside Purcell Pavilion right now.
I'm buying this as well. I think Notre Dame has a chance to get back because I think they're going to be in the playoff pretty much every single year or most years here as long as Marcus Freeman has the program trending in the way that it's going right now. Meanwhile, I have zero confidence in the men's basketball program, at least in the short term. But that does lead us to our last prompt here. We're going away from football. Micah Shrewsbury will be the head basketball coach of Notre Dame men's basketball at the start of the 2026-2027 season. So not next year, not this upcoming season, the one after that. It would be his fourth year with the program.
So I'm buying this for a couple of reasons. One, despite, some of what he's done, self-inflicted to himself lately, I'm not all the way out on Shrews yet. And I do think he'll improve. But more practically, I think he'll still be the head coach because he signed a 7-year deal. And I think that, you might have to give him at least 4 years when you make that sort of financial commitment. So I think he's going to be the head coach 2 seasons from now.
I agree. I'm buying this as well, but I still am buying Notre Dame making it to the national championship in football before they win a tournament game, which is sad. But, this is kind of the horse that Notre Dame rode in. When you sign him to a 7-year deal, you got to give him some time. And I know that there's a lot of optimism about this recruiting class coming in next year, but personally, I don't know if that necessarily translates to NCAA tournament wins because the best teams in college basketball are usually older. I mean, hell, you even got Mike Bray going on Twitter saying get old and stay old, and I do think that's the formula. And I really need to see just how bad things get after the season, so maybe the smart move would be to hold it for this prompt, but I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit more optimistic, but I would be lying if I said I'm not concerned about like Marcus Burton leaving and Tay Davis. Like, I just don't know who is going to be on the team next year. Like, I know they got this good freshman class coming in, but they're going to need a lot more than that to have any chance of turning this thing around next season.
Yeah, the best thing that Notre Dame has going for it is that the ACC is bad. And they just have to hope that whoever Virginia hires, he's a whiff. Jai Lucas in Miami, he's a whiff. And some of these teams that have been good, over the last 10, 15 years that are bad now stay bad. So that's kind of the outlook I'm taking on it.
All right. Those are all the prompts I had. You got any final thoughts before I let you go?
No. What'd you say? Camp's like 2 weeks from right around now?
Yeah, 2 weeks, a little under 2 weeks. Notre Dame's going to be back out there on the practice field getting ready for the next season, and we'll be following along the whole way.
Absolutely. Can't wait.
That is a wrap for today's episode. Thanks again for making this your first listen of the day. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow and Friday of this week, and we're doing another Friday mailbag. So remember, to get those questions in, if you want to be featured on the show, send them in on X at LockedOnIrish, through Instagram DMs at LockedOnIrishPod, or you can submit yours in the YouTube comments, and I'll dig through them and find them there. Please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast. And if you liked what you saw today, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Or if you're listening to the podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you gave this show a 5-star rating and left a review on your preferred platform. And I'll see you tomorrow.